Good evening, councillors, staff, members of the public. Please be upstanding for Her Worship Mayor Karen Vernon.
Good evening, everyone. It's now 5:30 and I'll declare this special council meeting of the Town of Victoria Park is open. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of the traditional owners. Nunjarapan Wajak Noongar, Budja Yakan Nidja Bilya Barduk. I am honoured to be standing on Wajak Noongar country on the banks of the Swan River. Nan Karach Noongar Mort Ken Kadat Nija Wajak Noongar Budja. Nan Karach Nija Noongar Brudia Kora Yeye Border Balapan Mordich Noongar Kadajan Mort Where Budja Yeye. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect past, present and emerging leaders, their continuing cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land which continues to be important today. Nanyunka Balapan Noongar Brudia Where Mort Nija Budja. I thank them for the contribution made to life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region. Please be seated. Good evening and welcome everyone, and to those who are joining us on live streaming this evening. Item 2 on the agenda is announcements from the presiding member. 2.1 is recording and live streaming of proceedings. In accordance with Regulation 14I of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, this meeting is being audio and video recorded and live streamed on the town's website. Under Clause 39(1) of the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2019, I do not give permission for any other person to record the proceedings of this meeting. By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be live streamed to the public. Recordings are also made available on the town's website following the meeting. 2.2, public question time and public statement time. As this is a special council meeting, any public questions or public statements must relate to the business of the agenda. There are guidelines that need to be adhered to in our council meetings, and during question and statement time, people speaking are not to personalise any questions or statements about elected members, town staff, or use any possible defamatory remarks. In accordance with Clause 40 of the Town's Meeting Procedures Local Law 2019, a person addressing the Council shall extend due courtesy and respect to the Council and the processes under which it operates, and shall comply with any direction by the presiding member. A person present at or observing a meeting shall not create a disturbance at the meeting by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings, whether by expressing approval or dissent, by conversing or by any other means. When the presiding member speaks during public question or public statement time, any person then speaking is to immediately stop, and every person present is to preserve strict silence so that the presiding member may be heard without interruption. In accordance with Clause 56 of the Meeting Procedures Local Law, both elected members and the public, when speaking, are not to reflect adversely on the character or actions of elected members or town employees. As is our usual practice, we have a limit of 3 questions per person and 2 minutes allocated to the making of statements per person. This is for the purpose of ensuring that everyone who wishes to ask questions or make statements gets a fair and equal opportunity to do so. As is also at my usual practice, if we don't have a lot of people who wish to ask questions or make statements and others do, we can be more generous with those restrictions for 3 questions per person and 2 minutes for statements. But generally, we use that as a rule of thumb to make sure everyone gets the same chance. So, item 3 on our agenda is attendance. We have all elected members in attendance save for an apology from Councillor Cruiser, and Councillor Devereux is on approved leave of absence. There are a number of town staff attending the meeting tonight, led by the CEO, Mr Askew. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Mr CEO, do we have any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. No, we've received none.
Thank you. Are there any elected members who have an interest they need to declare? This is now the opportunity, since this particular meeting only has 1 item on the agenda. No interests that need to be declared. All right, we will then move on to public question time, which I'll now open at 5:35 p.m. Now, I've had an indication given to me by our council liaison officer of people who have already indicated that they would like to ask a question and or later make statements. So I will call the people on my list first, but then I will call from the public gallery. So you won't miss out on an opportunity to ask questions even if your name is not currently on the list. And the same will be true when we move to public statement time. But for now, we're going to deal formally with public question time, which is item 5. So Caroline Mitchell, if you could please come forward. You just need to switch the microphone on. And once you do, we need you to state your name, please, and your suburb. That's a requirement under our meeting procedures, local law. Thank you.
Is that on? My name is Caroline Mitchell, Carlisle. This has been classed as a significant development application as part of the WAPC listing. My question is related to, I guess, the use of the site. On your website, it stated that Wholesome have operated there since 1996 and that concrete manufacturing has been there for about 40 or 50 years. I'm trying to understand the agreement that is in place, or I guess what influence the town of Vic Park has over the legal agreements in relation to it being a noxious industry and usually prohibited in light industrial zones, particularly around residential areas. So I guess the question is, what, I guess, legal rights do they have in terms of, I guess, tripling the amount of output that they're planning to make annually? And is there kind of any benefits, I guess, from a Vic Park or any influence that they can have in terms of the way that that land is used? Just to understand, I guess, the concept, like the context of the scope and how far they can realistically push it, because there seems to be kind of varying numbers.
All right, that feels like there was probably more than 3 questions in there, but I think that some of them are perhaps rolled into one. I'm going to go to our Manager of Development Services, Mr. Cruikshank. I think probably we will have captured a number of your questions, but if Mr. Cruikshank is able to start with the issue about the, I guess, not so much legal agreements, but how this the zoning works for what has previously been called a noxious industry in a light industry zoned area. Mr. Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor, according to the search of the town's records that have been undertaken, there was a this been operating on the site since 1977. The City of Perth land use records indicate that in 1985 it was being used as industry ready mix concrete mixing depot. So there's a planning approval, a planning acknowledgement in place, and it's been used for concrete purposes for some considerable time. There's been applications over the years to expand the facility. Most notably in 2010, there was an application submitted to the Metro Inner South JDAP, which was essentially to double the capacity from what it was operating and to go 24 hours a day. At that particular point in time, that was operating under the town planning scheme number 1. And under town planning scheme number 1, it fell under the land use classification of a noxious industry, and a noxious industry is or was a prohibited use of land. However, the town planning scheme of the time, and in fact most town planning schemes, even today's town planning scheme, allows for what they call non-conforming use rights, which is where if you have had a business or operation approved lawfully under a previous town planning scheme, you can continue to operate that use, notwithstanding that it's now a prohibited use. So that was the basis of the approval in 2020, was that it was a non-conforming use of land and was capable of being approved in an expanded capacity. We have a new town planning scheme which came into effect in December of last year, local planning scheme number 2. Now under local planning scheme number 2, the concrete manufacturing is no longer regarded as a noxious industry. It's regarded as an industry land use. An industry land use is a discretionary land use in the industrial zone. So it's at the discretion of, in this instance will be the State Development Assessment Unit as to whether to approve the application. So I guess what I'm saying is there are historical approvals that have allowed the land to be used for concrete purposes. This application today is being considered under local planning scheme number 2, and it's a discretionary land use.
I think there was also a question that was asked about what opportunity or what rights does the town of Victoria Park have to influence what is effectively the land is used for? So I took that to be not necessarily about what we can do tonight, because our role tonight is to make a decision on what recommendation will be sent to the WA Planning Commission for their process. But in terms of what we're able to do with uses of land like this, I'll go back to Mr. Cruikshank.
Madam Mayor, in terms of a development application process, this application is submitted through the significant development assessment pathway that's run by the state. So our role in this particular application is to provide a recommendation, assessing the application against the planning framework and providing a recommendation, which then goes off to the State Development Assessment Unit, and they are ultimately the decision maker. I guess the town also has an ongoing role, as we have to date with the existing operations, in terms of dealing with any complaints that might be received in terms of noise impacts, dust impacts, things of that kind. So the town has an ongoing role to ensure compliance with relevant standards.
All right. I think that probably covers over most of your questions.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. If you just want to wait there for a moment, I will just see if there's anyone else who wants to ask questions, because there are no other names on my list. If there aren't other names on my list, I'm happy if you had follow-up questions to clarify some of the answers you heard. Is there anyone else in the public gallery who wishes to ask questions about this application? Everybody's kind of shaking their head no. So, Ms. Mitchell, if you had another question or so that you wanted to ask for clarification, you're welcome to do so.
I guess in terms of if it's part of your recommendation, I guess just the thoughts around, given that it was only the end of, was it last year, that the kind of agreement was kind of reinstated and it wasn't kind of noxious, I guess technically it still is, how long that is in place for, and if we think it's appropriate for the scale of it being 3 times the size based off of agreements made 50 years ago is reasonable.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Mr. Cruikshank, because as I understand the first part of your question, we had Town Planning Scheme number 1 in the town of Victoria Park from the time we were formed in 1994 until the state government approved our Town Planning Scheme number 2, which happened at the end of last year. It is open to us to amend our town planning scheme at any time that we choose, but the process to do so is a lengthy one. So, Mr. Cruikshank, going forward, I think one of the intent behind the question might be to find out, would we in future change the town planning scheme? Would that see a change for the zoning for this type of land for a land use activity like a concrete batching plant?
Madam Mayor, in terms of putting together local planning scheme number 2, there was a process, I suppose, in terms of developing the new zonings or determining the new zonings for land, the land uses in different zones, etc. That was subject to community consultation and ultimately supported by the council and went to the WAPC and the Minister for Planning. So we have a relatively new town planning scheme. I guess a town planning scheme effectively could be amended at the, the instruction of the council at any time if it's considered that there is a need to amend the scheme in any way to deal with an emerging land use or something that wasn't considered when the initial planning scheme was put together. So I don't think there's any intent or appetite at this point in time to amend the scheme, but again, that's council's prerogative or staff prerogative if we see that there's a particular issue that needs to be addressed, that or a gap maybe in the current scheme. So yeah.
And in terms of the questioner's other part to it, which is where are we at now with regards to an original approval that goes back potentially as long ago as 50 years with bringing it up to date now? Is that something you consider is covered in your report, or is there anything further you'd like to say in answer to the questioner's point?
I don't think there's a lot more I can add, Madam Mayor. There is an existing approval. It's in place. There's in fact a 2020 approval to expand the site to double the production. That approval remains valid, and in fact I think that's valid for another year or so. So that approval could be enacted at any point in time. So there is a existing approval for the current operations. There is an approval in place which the proponent could choose to enact at any time to double the production. And then obviously we've now got this application before you tonight.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. There being no other questions from the public, I will close public question time at 5:46 p.m. Item 6 on the agenda is public statement time, which I'll now open at 5:46 p.m. There are a number of people who have indicated they'd like to make a statement. I'll go through those people in order first, and then if there's anyone else in the public gallery who'd also like to make a statement but hasn't put their name on the list, there'll be an opportunity for you to do so. So first on the list to make a statement is Stacey Wessling. If you could please come forward, and we will ask you to try and confine your statement as close as you can to the 2-minute mark so that others can have a fair opportunity. But when you're ready, just state your name and your suburb, please.
Stacey Wessling, Carlisle. My name is Stacey, and my family and I live at 11 Cohen Street, Carlisle, which is directly across the road from Wholesome's concrete batching plant. We strongly oppose Wholesome's development application. The proposal for 12 Cohen Street is not appropriate for a facility of this scale within a light industrial zone, particularly given its proximity to established residential properties. The town planning scheme makes it clear that the purpose of light industrial zoning is to ensure that developments adjoining residential areas are set back, screened, or otherwise designed so as not to detract from residential amenity. The installation of 6 31-metre silos towering far above the 5-metre perimeter wall would be completely at odds with this objective. In addition, the proposal for 24/7 operations with approximately 110 vehicle movements during the night would be hugely disruptive, destroying the quiet evenings currently enjoyed by the nearby residents. The City of Vincent was clear with their position against having concrete batching facilities in East Perth. I would like to see the town of Vic Park advocate for their residents and oppose this development application. Protecting the livelihood and well-being of the community surrounding 12 Cohen Street should remain a priority of the council. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next on the list, Shay Bessel. Please just state your name and your suburb and then start when you're ready.
Sure. Shay Bessel, Carlisle. I strongly object to the proposed expansion of the concrete batching facility directly across the road from my home. The facility already generates significant noise, dust and light which impacts the daily lives of residents in the area. Expanding its operations will only amplify these problems, further reducing the amenity and livability of our neighbourhood. Residents have the right to clean air, reasonable levels of noise and a safe and peaceful environment, none of which can be guaranteed if this development is approved. Dust emissions from the batching facilities are well known to pose health risks, particularly for children, the elderly and those with respiratory conditions such as asthma. Despite dust management plans, fine particulate matter inevitably escapes into the surrounding environment. My family and neighbours and our property are directly exposed as we live across the road from the site. An expansion of this scale will increase dust output and heighten health risks for the entire community. Traffic is another serious concern. The facility already generates a steady stream of large trucks entering and exiting throughout the day, contributing to congestion, road wear and safety hazards for pedestrians and cyclists. With an expansion, truck movements will increase, leading to more noise both on the public road and within the facility. The noise emitted from the heavy equipment operating within the facility currently, prior to 6 a.m, will likely be heard throughout the night and early morning should the expansion be approved. Finally, approving this development would set a poor precedent by prioritising industrial expansion over the well-being of residents in an established residential area. Our community has invested in making this neighbourhood a safe and pleasant place to live, and the expansion of heavy industrial operation runs counter to those values. I urge the decision makers to reject this application in order to protect the health, safety and amenity of local residents, and to ensure that future planning decisions respect the balance between industry and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, Ryan Carstairs.
G'day, Ryan Carstairs, Carlisle. So I'd also like to oppose the development of the concrete plant at Cone Street in Carlisle. I am a resident of the town of Vic Park for the past 7 years, a recent homeowner. I've been in Carlisle for the last 5 years. I've got a lot of friends here. I have a dog here, so I have I know a lot of people in the community, and they are around the Jupiter, Planet, Rayleigh and Carlisle and the Cone Street areas. So I'm here representing a lot that couldn't be here today. We're concerned about the impact in terms of noise, dust, and traffic more than anything, given that it goes against the purpose of what a light industrial area should be. For me, I live a little bit further away. I live towards Archer Street, but even still, what I'm worried about is the cumulative effect that approving a development such as this would have, not just in terms of traffic in the immediate proximity, but also what it'll do to our community overall as a result. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, that's the names that were on my list. Is there anyone else in the public gallery who wishes to come forward and make a statement during public statement time? This item? No? All right, on that basis, I'll close public statement time at 5:52 p.m. Item 7 on our agenda is presentations. 7.1 is petitions. Although we don't have any petitions for presentation at this council meeting, council did receive a petition on the 19th of August from Kenrick Armitage on behalf of a number of people requesting council to make a statement opposing the concrete batching plant's redevelopment. At that time, there were, I think, 151 signatures that were presented with the petition. Tonight I'm acknowledging that an additional 28 signatures have been received from Mr Armitage in relation to the petition that was tabled on the 19th of August. That brings the current total signatures to 179. They're still yet to all be verified by the town staff. But in any event, the petition has been received, so we thank Mr Armitage for bringing to our attention that there are 28 more signatures attached to that petition. We don't otherwise have any other petitions for presentation tonight. Item 7.2 is about formal presentations. We don't have any of those. Item 7.3 is deputations. This is permitted under our meeting procedures local law, and we've had a request for 2 petitions tonight. The first petition is on behalf of Holcim, the applicant for tonight's development application, and the second request is from Mr Armitage to do a deputation. So under our meeting procedures local law, it's necessary for council to vote as to whether to receive these deputations. Once council's vote has been cast, assuming that the recommendation to accept both the deputations is approved, we will then hear the deputations in the order in which they appear in the resolution. So for elected members, the recommendation is that council receives the following 2 deputations on item 9.1 State Development Assessment Unit referral for proposed redevelopment of concrete batching plant from, firstly, Ms Amanda Butterworth from Alerting and Associates, Mr Sam Russell, Ms Jenny Morrow and Mr Paul Hallworth from Holcim in support of the officer recommendation and report. And secondly, a deputation from Mr Kenrick Armitage in relation to the petition requesting that council make a statement opposing the concrete batching plant redevelopment Carlisle, which is a Part 11B application for significant development, currently with the WAPC, notwithstanding the request was not made within the time period specified in the meeting procedures local law, having regard to the significant public interest in this item. Can I seek a mover and seconder, please, for the recommendation? All right, so that has been moved Councillor Minson and seconded Deputy Mayor Ife. I'm going to formally ask, is there any dissent to the recommendation? No. There being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. So thank you for that. We're now going to proceed to hear the deputations. Under our rules, deputation presenters have up to 10 minutes to present their deputation. When you have finished presenting your deputation, can I please ask you to remain at the desk, because under our rules, elected members are entitled to ask deputation presenters questions if they wish to do so. Also, in relation to the first presentation on behalf of Wholesome, our meeting procedures, local law provide for a maximum of 5 people to be a part of a deputation, but for only 2 people to speak at any one time. So if I could ask for the first 2 people who wish to speak either for the whole or part of the presentation of the deputation from Wholesome to please come forward. I know that you will have it organised as to who's going first and thereafter. And we've already received your PowerPoint presentation. It's now up on the screen for elected members and the public gallery. So whenever you're ready, if you could just let us know who it is who's going to be addressing us first, that would be really helpful. And when you're ready, we'll hear your deputation. Thanks.
Great. Okay, thanks. Hopefully you can hear me okay. My name's Sam Russell. I'm the General Manager of Wholesome Western Australia for Concrete and Aggregates. Firstly, I'd like to say thanks for having us, Mayor and everybody else and members of the public. I'll go through this, I'll do a couple of slides and then I'll hand over to Jenny Morrow, my colleague, who is Manager for Planning for WA. So, okay, hopefully this works. All right, I'm going to look down on here, just look at my notes. So I think everybody knows what we're proposing, the upgraded concrete batch plant facility on Cohen Street in Carlisle. Difference in dates from everybody, but long story short, we've been operating for a very, very long time and it's a critical part of our plant network which supplies work obviously in this area but also into the central business district. We heard a bit about 2021. We had an approval, but there's since been a change, which is removal of our East Perth concrete batch plant for the end of December 2027. Who are we? So a lot of us will have known us previously as Readymix. That's what we operated as. We're one of the largest producers in Australia currently for both, in particular, concrete and aggregate type products. So we make footpaths, houses and roads. We supply materials into those areas. We operate in all major metropolitan cities in Australia, but also most regional towns in Western Australia. So we've got the largest network in WA. And I guess if I talk locally, we do things like the Busport, Yagan Square, but things like McCallum Park that you've got here, driveways, paths, houses. We do all sorts of different work. We've been operating for nearly 125 years, and as people know, we've changed names a few times, but often people know us as Readymix overall. You can see there we've got a large number of plants over here. In Western Australia, we have about 25 concrete plants and about 11 quarries, so a large number of operating sites. Everybody will be interested in the need for the project. So this plant is going to become the closest plant to the central business district from 2028 onwards, as Heidelberg and ourselves have to leave that area. In addition, we are the only plant within about 8 kilometres of this space, so we supply most of the concrete requirements in this local area as well. Something that a lot of people may not know is that concrete has a time stamp, so it actually goes hard quite quick. So it's very important to be somewhat close. Trucks can travel, but you can't be too far away from your destination, otherwise the concrete goes hard. In terms of what is proposed, I'm going to hand over to Jenny, who will talk a bit about the batch plant.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So my name's Jenny Morrow. I'm the Planning Approvals Manager for Wholesome for WA. What is proposed? So we are proposing a complete redevelopment of the site and the construction of a new modern concrete batch plant that's been designed to environmental and safety best practice. The main components are noise walls, and we do have our facilities for storage of aggregate, silos and production of concrete. A different type of plant than what we have at the moment. So we are proposing in-ground aggregates delivery with an aggregate storage tower and conveyors all the way through to our load-out facility, quite different to what we have at the moment, which is open aggregate bins with a front-end loader. Facilities for parking and washing out of agitators and car parking as well. And then I think we have some pictures or modelled views of the existing plant at the moment, and then what is actually proposed as well. So as I was saying, a complete redesign of the site, focusing on minimising environmental impacts. So we've looked at noise, dust, traffic, lighting impacts, and also improving the landscape around the facility with a number of environmental studies to determine what the impact is and inform the project design and site layout. So an arboricultural survey for the trees, air quality modelling with a management plan, transport impact statement with a traffic management plan, lighting design, landscaping, visual impact assessment, an acoustic assessment with a noise management plan, a surface water assessment, water balance, and we're also undertaking a groundwater review as well. So I'll just run through the key aspects. So annual throughput, as has been referenced in the discussions, we did have a 2021 approval to double. Now we are looking at increasing to 3 times to 300,000 cubic metres. And the reason for the increase is because it will take up the East Perth plant volume, which we're required to close at the end of 2027. Hours of operation, we actually have approval to operate 24 hours at the moment, so there is no change from what is actually existing approved for the site. Vehicle movements, we are increasing the vehicle movements, which are reflected with our throughput. Noise, we've conducted the acoustic assessment and it's compliant with the noise regulations. We have numerous noise walls with the new proposal and also cladding around a number of our structures. Visual amenity, we do have taller structures, but from Cowan Street, the view is very similar. We have committed to public artwork as well and landscaping to improve visual amenity. Energy efficiency, improved energy efficiency with solar power and also provision for electric fleet. So instead of a diesel front-end loader, we'll have an electric front-end loader. Water management, we'll have a larger burst flush system and improve water efficiencies with also increased recycling. Lighting, a lighting plan to meet the Australian standard. And traffic, no heavy vehicles on Cowan Street. All heavy vehicles will enter and exit on Brick Street. Sorry, I was a bit slow with changing the slide on that one. So just moving on to our next slide. So we have undertaken stakeholder and community consultation with the Town of Victoria Park, the WA PC, Minister for Planning, Department of Water and Environmental Regulation, and also the community. So in late July, we did a door knocking area for our neighbours and 200 metres from Cowan Street around the site, and also a letter drop up to 500 metres around the site, and invited stakeholders to comment into the DPLH survey link when it was publicly advertised. Assessment process, I think as been mentioned tonight, we have submitted the DA. We are going the significant development pathway. Also, we're preparing a works approval amendment application and a licence to take water amendment application as well, which will be assessed by Department of Water and Environmental Regulation. And lastly, our timing for the project. We proposed to start construction upon receipt of approval, so all subject to approval in March next year. We need to meet the timing for decommissioning for our East Perth plant and to bring this plant online to take up the volume for delivery of concrete to the CBD and surrounds. So thank you. That's the end of our presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Are there questions from elected members? Councillor Hamer.
Just a couple of questions about the current facility and its impacts that it's currently having in regards to traffic and noise, etc. So this proposed design would increase the output from your side to what is currently achieving now. But would you say it would have better outcomes in regards to the noise and the dust with the walls and the electric vehicles and the wet instead of the dry, sort of those? How much would that sort of be better than currently?
Yeah, look, we envisage it to be a significant improvement from what's there. So the current plant is a very old plant at the end of its life. What we are proposing has been completely designed to meet modern day requirements, and we are compliant with the noise regulations both day and night. So with the noise walls, as well as a different process at night, which is what we call a wet mix plant. So most concrete plants have a dry mix plant, and part of the noisier activity is slumping when the dry ingredients go into the agitator and then it moves to what we call the slump stand. Then the noisy part is when the barrel spins and they add water to make the right consistency. So with a wet mix plant at night, the concrete is pre-batched in the load-out facility, and it drops into the back of the agitator, so there's no requirement for slumping. So that, with the noise, significant improvement, and with the dust, I think, as I've mentioned, it's in-ground aggregates delivery and conveyed all the way to the storage facility, which is completely enclosed, and then conveyed, complete enclosed conveyor to the load-out facility. Whereas at the moment we have open aggregate bins, and we do a lot of handling of aggregates with our front-end loader. So, you know, there's more potential for dust with our current process.
And just on that, is the current process and facility with the dust and the processing, is that within the range allowed for the current restrictions on noise and dust, or are you having some issues with that, with its current setup, that this new plan would alleviate?
Yeah, look, we... So sorry, can you repeat the question again?
You mentioned that the new design would sort of make sure that the nighttime noise and dust was well within the allowed confines for that. Are you saying that the current facility is operating, sometimes having difficulties within those parameters, or currently you're within the noise and the dust levels, and this would be an improvement to be below that even further, or are there two different things? Yeah,
look, you know, I think at the moment, you know, there's more potential for dust and noise at the moment. We operate within the limits, but I think, you know, it is a very old plant. It's time for it to be decommissioned. It does have safety issues as well. So, you know, with a brand new plant, we had the opportunity to completely redesign it and look at, you know, really making it the best plant that we could with the lowest environmental impact.
Thanks, Councillor Hamer. Any other questions? Councillor Minson and then Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Matt Vernon. Question on the East Perth plant. What's the current capacity of the East Perth plant?
It's roughly, like in terms of what it typically does, low 100,000 cubic metres is what we would typically do out of there.
Thank you. And another question, there's some reference to it about, I guess, the asset life of the existing plant at Carlisle. We're saying it's at end of life. Is that on the horizon, like a few years that this plant needs to be decommissioned?
I can talk to that. Well, in fact, you might like me to expand further on East Perth, because one thing about East Perth, we're not alone. There's Heidelberg just up the road. So probably what's important to this group is that network of plants supplies typically about 300,000 cubic metres per year. And so collectively, I guess that amount of concrete has to go somewhere. So it's not as simple as, we take us and we move there. The whole network into that area is going to change overall. There's actually not a lot of capacity in the fringe plants that you describe it, which is mostly based in like Bassendean and Bayswater area, or Osborne Park area is where most of it comes in from. Which is probably interesting to concrete manufacturers, but maybe not to most. The second part of your question, was about
The asset life at the existing
end of
Carlisle
life.
plant.
So what our current projections are about the existing Carlisle plant or Welshpool plant is that we think we would need to do significant maintenance works prior to 2030 for it to actually continue to operate. We're spending a lot now on maintaining the plant, but we believe it would be unviable economically to continue to operate past 2030. That's what our engineering department advises. And so somewhere in probably the couple of years prior to that, if it was to continue as it is, would require huge investment just to maintain it as it is now. If that answers your question overall.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Councillor Minson. Councillor Miles, and then Deputy Mayor Ive.
Thank you. So you were talking about some of the environmental improvements for the new proposal, and I obviously know that there was this other proposal that's still on the table to double the capacity. So did that not have any of those improvements? And I wasn't in council when that decision happened, so I'm not really across the detail.
Yeah, look, it did have some of the improvements, but I think the difference between the 2021 approval, or the plan that we had approved at that time, to now is we have decided to use a wet mix plant at night, and also the in-ground aggregates delivery, and the storage with the conveyors. So although what we had proposed in 2021 was a modern plant and, meets all of the environmental requirements, this is, a different plant with additional benefits, with the wet mix plant at night and also in-ground delivery of aggregates and also the conveyed storage. So more benefits in regards to noise and dust.
And so, because when you were speaking, so you said that it would be a complete redevelopment of the site, and then you said something else about, which I didn't write down, so I just wanted to check. So, but it's a complete change of what you're, well, not a complete change because it's concrete, but you said something, you said complete redevelopment of the site and then a change in process? Well, yeah, what was the other thing that you said?
So, yeah, look, I think when I was talking about the change in process around dry mix versus wet mix, so most plants around Perth do what we call dry mix, which is what we are proposing as well during the day. This new proposal is both dry mix and wet mix. And the difference is with dry mix, the agitated truck drives under the loadout bay all of the dry ingredients, so sand, gravel, cement goes into the agitator bowl. Then it drives to what we call the slump stand, and this is the noisy part of the activity where the barrel on the agitator truck has to rotate, and they often have to rev the engine to get it turning at the right rotation. They add water manually, and the batcher looks inside the truck and they can tell that it's the right consistency. So dry mix plant is noisier because you have what we call slumping. Wet mix is much, much quieter, it's why we proposed it for night, where the concrete is pre-batched with water inside the loadout building, and then the wet concrete goes straight into the back of the agitator truck. There's no need for any slumping because it's already batched with water and it's at the right consistency.
So the dry, noisy thing will still happen in the day, and then there'll be the
Correct.
wet one in the
Yeah.
night. Okay. Just a couple more things. So you just said in answering Councillor Mintz's question that the asset life was until 2030, but assumably, I guess if this didn't go ahead, you'd still be going with the previous plans that were approved, or they've been kind of abandoned completely, or you're not allowed to tell me.
I can answer that. So probably it's the reason why it stays significance. There is not the capacity in the current. I mean, we look at this over a long time period, but we would see it as a significant failing because there isn't the capacity to absorb the concrete demand in that broader, what I call CBD network. So, I mean, if that's the best plan B we'd have, we'd persevere, but it would become a problem for the community more broadly. I don't know where they get their concrete from.
Okay, and just one quick last, maybe hopefully quick. You mentioned right at the end about a license to take water. So you're increasing the capacity of. Like, I don't know what that means. Can you just explain briefly what?
If I can talk operationally on it, so a fair bit of water goes into the concrete mix. So when you increase your output, you need to increase your water as one of the ingredients that goes into batching concrete.
So that's coming out of the bore, like it's bore water that you're kind of.
Yeah, typically, yeah. And to add to that, we recycle as much as we possibly can. So that's why we run the pits and capture systems that Jenny was referring to. We aim to recycle and keep a closed loop in the batch plant as much as we can, capture all rainfall events so that we produce that. We have targets around reducing the minimal amount of what we call drawdown environmental water, whether it's from a bore or from an aquifer or from a town water system. We want to minimise that.
Do you know how much more water you'd be needing? Is it triple? Because you're tripling the capacity?
So the amount we would use, so the total amount of consumption that goes into a batch is completely proportional to the volume, so it would be triple. However, with the recycling capability that you have in this, you can remove quite often up to a third of your raw input in. Exactly what that number amounts to, I don't know. I don't know what exactly that would look like because it depends on your rainfall events and how you capture. But when you build a state-of-the-art facility with better recycling, it doesn't equate to exactly triple.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Ife.
Thank you. You've told us that the current facility in Carlisle is probably reaching the end of its life. Is this the only alternative? Is expansion of the Carlisle site the only alternative that's available to you at this stage, or are there other potential sites or other potential projects that you could be exploring? So
great question. We obviously have to justify any kind of funding, so we have to look at every single option. And one of the reasons why we're here is the decision that was made about departing East Perth in 2027. So part of that was an obligation for us to be assisted in finding alternate sites. We were not provided that assistance. So we went in a pretty extensive search on our own to try and find other facilities and sites. There is actually a benefit from having a greater network and replacing one plant with another plant, and none of those sites were feasible. So we don't believe we have a better option. That's why we're proposing this overall. And if I use an example of Heidelberg, who are our neighbour in East Perth, it looks like their next best option is significantly worse than what our next best option is as well.
But you do have a next best option. You said you don't have a better option. Do you still have another option? Is there a plan B somewhere out there?
We don't have a feasible plan B. No, so if I can talk about my business case, there's basically 4 versions of this.
Thank you.
Any further questions from other elected members? Councillor Melrosa.
I would like to get an idea of how much capacity this site's actually got. So in terms of cubic metres, so you said this proposal brings it up to 300,000. What's the ultimate capacity of this site?
300,000. Yeah.
In the current proposal, but could this site be expanded further? Yeah. Is there room on the site where you could add more capacity, I guess, without enacting your plan B?
look, with our proposal, we have to forecast in quite, significant looking forward into the future, both to capture the CBD from East Perth and for the Welsh Pool plant where we provide in a metropolitan area. And I think, look, 300,000 is what we thought looking far into the future with the spend on the upgrade for the plant. We thought, I don't believe there will be increases from 300,000.
And just so I'm clear, are you talking about the structure or the yard size? Or both?
Probably both, but more so the yard size. I acknowledge you're probably bulking it up to a capacity that's going to handle, well, what I would say the heavy lifting of providing the CBD. It's concrete.
Yeah.
So one would maybe presume that over time, given that there aren't any great options, as you've said, that this site will be heavily relied on to continue to provide for Perth's CBD growth and other high density areas, that we are all anticipating doubling the population. So we would be anticipating quite a lot more concrete going forward, maybe not in the first 5 or 10 years, but certainly as we're getting into the 20s and 30s.
I think in terms of the forecast, we were looking at 50-year life.
Okay.
So that's sort of where we've gone to with this 300,000. We have actually looked far into the future to make sure that, what we put there is going to actually, be at the correct size to cope with increased population growth.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like if I try to take an operational view, like the site's not a large site for us, so it's certainly not unconstrained in terms of footprint. Some larger sites you can do it, and you ultimately are constrained by like what we would call a lane. So the load out facility, like there's 2 at this facility. There's a limit that hits, and it's a bit hard to answer because it depends a bit on where the work is, what kind of work you're doing, and so on. But I think like it's the best number we've got. I couldn't see that facility, for example, like it wouldn't do. I can't imagine it doing much more than that ever, really, practically.
Does Wholesome own that land, or do they lease it?
Yeah, we own the land.
Is there any conversation around whether or not that site providing the fair, I guess, majority of concrete for Perth could be a potential risk in terms of, say, for instance, there was a traffic issue on Orrong Road, which happens fairly often. That's your major route into the city with your concrete that needs to get to its destination in half an hour. What are your contingencies around that in case there was some sort of situation and you're relying on this plant and only this plant?
That's every day of Paul and Maya's life is that. So we rely on a couple of things. We rely on the greater road network, and we rely on our batch plant network. So we almost every day we have an operational issue of sorts, whether that's a traffic incident out on the road or we might have an own issue within our own plant. So we have 8 batch plants through the Perth metropolitan area now, and we utilise those. So what happens is, if for whatever reason, if Welsh Pool becomes untenable, we might operate out of Gosnells or Bibra Lake or whatever is that is really our next best option. Whatever is our next best option. So we try and set up our network like that, because when you're pouring like for those that have done it, a house slab or a driveway or a multi-rise building, it's pretty important for the flow to continue. So yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Melrosa. I do have a question with regards to East Perth. Am I right in understanding that you had applied for an extension of the licence for East Perth to continue on into the future? Is that right?
Yes.
How long was that going to be for?
So there's a long story of the history, but the most recent, the decision that was handed down in 2024, we had asked for an additional 3 years. So we asked for 2030 and we got 27.
And in terms of the East Perth plant, I am aware of some of the history, but it's quite long and there seems to be a lot of both legal decisions and planning decisions and all of that sort of thing. So my understanding is that when you say that you weren't given any assistance to find another site to relocate out of East Perth, I had understood that the City of Vincent was looking at land that they owned in Osborne Park as a potential relocation spot for you, until the City of Stirling, in which the land is located, said they didn't want it. And I think they voted as a council to lobby the Minister for Planning for it not to be located in Osborne Park. I read that. Is that your understanding of what happened around the proposal for you maybe to be able to relocate your East Perth site into Osborne Park?
So there was one parcel of land, which we're probably talking about the same one, which was offered up. We very quickly identified it as uneconomically viable. Heidelberg took it a bit further, and then they came to the same conclusion.
So in terms of your saying that you've looked at other locations and they weren't feasible because you're looking for something relatively close to the city, to what extent did you identify land in the suburb of Welshpool that's in the city of Canning, which is only 5 or so minutes down the road from our suburb of Carlisle? Because that really is what I'd call heavy industrial out there. Was there any locations out there that you looked at or considered, given its proximity to the city and to all major transport routes?
I'm not aware of any that we looked at in that area. However, I'd say that would being so close proximity to this site, we would not ordinarily look there. Where we predominantly found ourselves looking was just north of the river in that area. It wouldn't practically or feasibly work for us to have 2 plants like that in close proximity. We don't do that.
No, I think I was perhaps foreshadowing that you might move completely to another site that could accommodate you that wasn't that far away from your existing one within our town. That's fine. That's all my questions. Were there any other questions from anyone? No? So thank you for your deputation. We appreciate that. We're now going to move on to our final deputation, which is from Kenrick Armitage. So if you'd like to come forward when you're ready. Sorry, our meeting rules don't unfortunately allow people to ask questions from the back. I recognise that there is someone who wishes to... I realise that the lady who's put her hand up is a part of the group that just presented a deputation, but I had understood they'd finished their deputation. There weren't other presenters on behalf of Wholesome. Okay, so look, what I understand has been conveyed to me is that the deputation was not finished and that there are other speakers to come. We were timing this deputation. The 2 speakers who did speak finished at approximately 9 minutes and 30 seconds. So that only left a very short amount of time, as in seconds, left for the remainder of the deputation. We wouldn't ordinarily extend a deputation because 10 minutes is well beyond the normal time that we allow for other people to make statements. It was my understanding from the 2 people who presented on behalf of Wholesome that when they finished that there wasn't anything further, as in, unfortunately, I think Mr. Russell and Ms. Morrow, you didn't indicate that there were more presentations were going to be made. So, Ms. Butterworth, how much longer did you have that you wanted to present from your presentation? Because this does present a bit of a problem for us. Just give me a moment. All right, so in accordance with clause 34, subsection 3B of the Meeting Procedures Law, deputations are not to address the council for a period exceeding 10 minutes without the agreement of the council. So it is open for council to extend the period of time for the deputation to be concluded. I'll formally ask whether or not council is prepared to agree or consider a motion to extend the time. If you indicate to me that you're willing to consider it, I'll move a motion on the table, but then it will be called for you to vote on. So I'm seeing some people nodding that they're prepared to consider it. So because they're prepared to consider it, I will on that basis move that council extend the time period for the Holcim deputation for a further period of 2 minutes. Is there a seconder for that? Noting, of course, if there's no seconder, it won't get on the table for voting. It's been seconded by Councillor Hamer. This is not, I consider this as largely a procedural motion, so I'm not looking for people to speak on it. But it has been seconded. So I'm going to do what I always do, which is ask, is there any dissent? If people indicate there is, then we'll just go to a vote. Is there any dissent to extending the time? I'm not seeing any indication, so on that basis I declare that procedural motion has carried unanimously. Ms Butterworth, if you'd like to come forward, please. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologise for the confusion. I'm a town planner assisting Holcim in regard to this application, and I just wanted to highlight that the land use is approved currently, as Mr Cruikshank has outlined previously. The plan has been designed to minimise impacts upon residents of Cohen Street in terms of noise and dust, and we consider it to be a visual improvement as well with the new landscaping on Cohen Street. The plant will enable ongoing and continuous reliable source of concrete for major infrastructure projects and building projects, not just in the Perth CBD, but also in the town as the town grows with a number of multi-storey developments which may well require the supply of high specification concrete, which this plant will be able to provide in an affordable and sustainable manner. The application is capable of approval under the planning framework, and despite the increased throughput with the comprehensive redevelopment of the site and relocation of the noisier activities away from the residential area, the replacement with modern equipment, it's considered that it will improve from the current situation that those residents currently experience. Just like to highlight that we are supportive of the officer recommendation and the conditions, and that I'm available to answer any other town planning queries should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any elected members who have any questions for this deputation presenter? No, there are none, so thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks very much. So now we'll go to our second deputation presenter, which is Kenrick Armitage. Now, we'll just note for both those members of council, staff and those who are watching on live streaming, as well as members in the public gallery, it's now 6:33 p.m. Ordinarily, we would have started our Tuesday night agenda briefing forum for the month of September. As the agenda briefing forum is not a formal meeting of council, at this stage I consider it's important that we continue with the special council meeting until it is concluded, because we're subject to a time limitation from the WA Planning Commission. So we need to make our decision on this tonight. So there may be people who've arrived in the audience who are here for the agenda briefing forum. That will be starting once the special council meeting is over. And for those who are watching on live streaming, who might be waiting for the agenda briefing forum to come on, that's where we're at the moment. If I was a guessing person, I'd say it's probably going to take at least another 15 minutes before this special council meeting is likely to be finished. So everybody can just keep that in mind. Thank you. So we're now going to hear from Kenrick Armitage. You also have a maximum of 10 minutes for your deputation. And when you're ready, please just state your name and we'll hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you. So Kenrick Armitage from Carlisle. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. I don't have an official deputation or a fancy PowerPoint for you, but I do have a statement that I'd like to read that was perhaps going to be over 2 minutes. So I appreciate the opportunity to have the deputation to make sure I can get this information across. First of all, I want to say how proud I am to be a resident of Carlisle in the town of Victoria Park. My wife and I purchased our first home in Con Street over 15 years ago and love the way that the town has continued to plan for a more livable and progressive urban future. That's why the proposed expansion of Holston concrete batching on Con Street feels so completely at odds with the vision and at odds with the vision of the town's own plans to rezone our area as a higher density residential area. Expanding heavy industry operation of this scale with the 24-hour operations right next to residential neighbourhoods and the Oak Street precinct would be a step back for our community. On behalf of the residents who signed our petition that we submitted to Council, I bring forward our concerns that were in our petition and our feedback that has been submitted to the planning. There are several compelling reasons why this proposal should not proceed in our opinion. These key points were the 24-hour operation and the continuous batching and truck movements and the risk of serious sleep disturbance for our local community. While it was mentioned that they currently have 24-hour operations, that was under the 2021 plan, and as mentioned that hasn't been enacted, nor has the mitigations that were in that plan be acted. So as far as we're concerned, they are still operating within their normal operating hours. The noise from the 24/7 operation and as mentioned by Wholesome, some unavoidable handbrake alarms that need to be on for safety, reverse squawkers and truck movements will cause significant nighttime disturbance to the local residents and family. It's incompatible with zoning, understanding that this is zoned as light industrial, but yes, does have a discretionary use which for existing plants. I believe that discretionary use, being as discussed from many years past of different plants, probably doesn't meet exactly with the local outlook on what this zoning should be. Our homes sit just 20 metres from the site and we feel that's far too close for a scale of this proposal and very much out of line with the surrounding industries that are along Con Street. The excessive height, the 31 metre high silos, 20 metre towers exceed the 12 metre height limit under the local planning scheme too, but acknowledge that they do have a discretionary use. We feel that this impacts the local character and visual amenities, even with their acknowledged artworks. The dust and health risks without the proper health risk assessments and the current planning, we into cement, dust or silica. We believe that this is contrary to local planning policy 3. Even now, the dust control remains inadequate with the current plant and they have done very little to minimise this. Traffic and safety, the significant increase in truck movements and the 110 additional nighttime movement raise real safety concerns for the local residents and conflicts with the town's livability goals. The lighting impacts, the application fails to provide sufficient detail on lighting design and compliance and glare and spill standards. These were what were raised in our permission that has been submitted. Wholesome themselves have acknowledged that this expansion is driven by the closure of their East Perth facility. The City of Vincent made the right decision when requiring Wholesome to relocate to the end of 2024, prioritising the residents' health and wellbeing. As Vincent's Mayor, Alison Zaman, was quoted last year, these plants have been located in a residential area for more than 20 years, so moving them is not before time. They continue to impact the health and amenity of the community through high levels of dust and noise and the constant heavy truck movements. The relocation will be a relief to the long-standing and new residents who have been promised this end to this historical planning abnormality. The similarities with Carlisle are undeniable. If it was not acceptable for the town of Vincent, it should not be acceptable for the town of Vic Park either. Let me be clear, I'm not anti-industry. We understand the importance of the reliable supply of concrete to Perth's growing CBD and the need for a facility to be within 60 minutes of the city. What we oppose is the scale, size and location and the long-term impact on this particular proposal. We believe a plan of this magnitude belongs in heavy industrial area, which will also support the future growth that Wholesome has raised that may be required. Sites such as Wellspool, Kenwick and Kewdale, we believe that this new modern plant would be best suited for. Finally, I want to stress that Wholesome does not have a strong record of putting community first. Despite letters saying they wish to be good neighbours and their previous expansion, with their previous expansion application, we raised multiple breaches in operating conditions, from dust mitigation to hours of operation, failure to manage wastewater and noise levels. These are on the record. As the company has made little effort to be a genuine contributor to our community, and we cannot afford to take their assurances at face value. In conclusion, I urge the Council and Wholesome to recognise the importance of aligning this decision with the town's vision for livability and high-quality neighbourhood. Just like East Perth, Victoria Park residents deserve protection from heavy industry operation that we think is not frankly fit for purpose in its current location. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Armitage? No? All right, thank you. Appreciate your time coming along tonight. Item 8 on the agenda is method of dealing with agenda business. We don't have any since there's only one item on the agenda. Item 9 is council reports. 9.1 is State Development Assessment Unit referral for proposed redevelopment of concrete batching plant. I wish to move an alternate motion ahead of the officer's recommendation, and that alternative motion I'll now read out, and I'll need to read my reasons into the record before seeking a seconder. So apologies, this will take a little period of time, as do all planning matters. So my alternate motion is that Council 1 advises the WA Planning Commission through the State Development Assessment Unit that development application WAPC reference number SD03525 for the proposed concrete batching plant redevelopment at number 12 lot 310 Cone Street, Carlisle is not supported, as it is not in the public interest and is inconsistent with the planning framework for the following reasons. First, the operation of a concrete batching plant is generally incompatible with urban areas and mixed-use areas. Second, the development application, although on an existing site, comprises an entirely new plant, the approval of which is contrary to contemporary planning practices, which would not support such activities in inner-city areas like Carlisle. Thirdly, the applicant's proposed use of the land does not meet the intent of the zoning objectives for light industry in Clause 16 of Schedule 1 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations, 2015, and is therefore inconsistent with the planning framework. Fourth, the proposed scale of operations is inappropriate for a light industry zoning and will exceed acceptable levels of industrial activity directly adjacent to residential properties zoned R30 within 16 metres of the development site, contrary to Local Planning Policy 3, non-residential uses in or adjacent to residential areas under the town's Local Planning Scheme number 2. Next, the proposed increases in concrete production, operating hours and vehicle movements represent an intensification of the use of the site well beyond its current use and will have adverse impacts from noise, dust pollution and traffic on the amenity of the surrounding locality, which includes land zoned residential R30 and mixed use under LPS 2. Next, the height of the 6 silos at a maximum height of 31 metres and the tower at approximately 17 metres is contrary to the 12-metre building height limit under Local Planning Scheme 2, negatively affecting local character and visual amenity. Next, the proposed hours of operation are contrary to the hours recommended for industrial uses in proximity to residential areas in accordance with Local Planning Policy 14, industrial uses in proximity to residential areas. Next, the acoustic assessment report fails to consider the cumulative impact of the noise combined with the additional traffic of 110 trucks per night during the night operations from the introduction of a wet batching plant. Next, the amenity disturbances of the expanded operations will continue to increase in their impact as the locality continues to densify with more sensitive uses over time in accordance with the area's local and state planning framework. Next, the operation of the concrete batching plant continues to be incompatible with the local and state planning framework that prioritises medium to high density transit-oriented residential developments close to public transport, such as the new upgraded Armidale rail line and the Oat Street train station within 1.5 kilometres. Next, the development application is essentially a complete redevelopment of the entire plant and is therefore contrary to Environmental Protection Authority Guidance Statement number 3, as it does not allow a minimum separation distance of 300 metres to 500 metres from the concrete batching plant to the nearest sensitive land use, which includes homes, cafes, shops, offices and public open space. Next, the development application is inconsistent with the strategic intent of the town's draft Oat Street Station Precinct Structure Plan, which proposes increased zoning to R60 for housing developments in the area surrounding this site, which are crucial in meeting the state government's infill density targets for our town under Perth and Peel at 3.5 million. Part 2 of my alternate motion is that Council provides recommended conditions should the WA Planning Commission or State Development Assessment Unit propose to approve all or part of this development application in accordance with those conditions contained in the Town of Victoria Park's Officer Recommendation for item 9.1 dated the 2nd of September 2025, and thirdly authorises the Mayor and CEO to engage in advocacy with the WA Government, including but not limited to the Minister for Planning, opposing this development application and outlining the local community's objections to the redevelopment as set out in the petition received by Council at its ordinary meeting on 19 August 2025. My reasons for moving this alternate motion are as follows. According to the applicant's summary brochure, which is attachment 19 to the agenda, the redevelopment will involve construction of a new modern automated concrete batch plant with a reconfigured plant layout within the existing site boundaries that will have a design life of approximately 50 years. Despite being constructed on an existing site, this development application is effectively for a brand new concrete batching plant of significantly expanded size and operation. In line with contemporary planning practices, a new development of this type would not, in my view, be supported in an inner city urban area, no matter how technologically advanced it is proposed to be, due to the adverse impacts on the amenity of the locality from the constant noise, dust and traffic. Under Local Planning Scheme number 2, this property is in an area zoned light industry, which reflects the majority of businesses within the Carlisle Welshpool southeast of Cone Street. This is unfortunate because it tends to equate this business of a concrete batching plant with surrounding businesses that do not involve activities known to generate dust, noise and traffic issues that have to be managed carefully. The zoning objectives in the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015 for light industry are firstly to provide for a range of industrial uses and service industries generally compatible with urban areas that cannot be located in commercial zones, and secondly to ensure that where any development adjoins zoned or developed residential properties, the development is suitably set back, screened or otherwise treated so as not to detract from the residential amenity. By contrast, the zoning objectives in the regulations for general industry are firstly to provide for a broad range of industrial service and storage activities which by the nature of their operation should be isolated from residential and other sensitive land uses, secondly to accommodate industry that would not otherwise comply with the performance standards of light industry, and finally seek to manage impacts such as noise, dust and odour within the zone. In my view, while the light industry zoning allows for various industrial activities, 1, a concrete batching plant does not qualify as light industry under the planning framework. 2, even if characterised as light industry, the proposed use is fundamentally incompatible with the purpose and intent of this zone. Thirdly, the nature and operational impacts of a concrete batching plant exceed the threshold of environmental and amenity impact contemplated for a light industry due to, firstly, dust emissions from large volumes of fine particulate matter, secondly, noise pollution from the operation of heavy vehicle movements, all of which generate significant noise above what would be reasonable in a light industry context, thirdly, traffic impact from high volumes of truck movements, which increases congestion and road wear and raises safety concerns. Fourth, visual impact and scale from 6 large silos and a tower, creating a bulk and scale more appropriate for a general or heavy industry zone. And finally, the use of washout bays and slurry handling producing contaminated wastewater, which is inconsistent with the low impact threshold of light industrial uses. Permitting a high-impact facility such as this proposed new expanded concrete batching plant in an area zoned only as light industry would firstly undermine the integrity of the zoning framework, secondly set an undesirable precedent that may expose nearby areas to inappropriate development, and thirdly compromise the strategic planning intent to provide a transition between heavy industrial and sensitive land uses. It is contrary to orderly and proper planning practices for this type of development to be placed in such close proximity to residential homes, offices, mixed use and retail outlets, such as those already surrounding this site. Sadly, however, it is in this such location. Allowing the applicant to expand the plant and operations so it can operate for the next 50 years will be inconsistent with the intended regeneration of Carlisle for increased density infill development and the Oat Street Station precinct structure plan designed to create a mixed-use zone that supports medium to high-density residential development alongside retail, hospitality, office and truly light industry uses in Welshpool. Both Carlisle and Welshpool are located close to the new Oat Street train station, and with the proposed new upcoding of zoning in the local planning scheme number 2, these suburbs will be important in helping the town meet its housing targets under Perth and Peel at 3.5 million by 2050. A concrete batching plant operating 24 hours a day will be an impediment to the appropriate regeneration of the area, deterring further additional medium to high density residential or mixed use developments due to visual pollution from the 31-metre silo heights, and is inconsistent with the town's strategic vision for the area. That concludes my alternate motion and the reasons. Can I now please seek a seconder for the alternate motion? That is seconded by Deputy Mayor Ife. Thank you. I just want to briefly say that no part of my decision to move an alternate motion was reflective of my failure to recognise the importance of concrete batching plants. They clearly have a role to play, and concrete will clearly, at least for a period of time into the future, be a well-used material for both the construction of homes, industry, commercial facilities and the like. I understand the need for it to be located in a place where it is quite accessible to the CBD, both for reasons to do with the integrity of the concrete itself, but also the cost of transporting it. However, in the 50s, when a cement batching plant began in Carlisle, Carlisle was still full of things like agricultural land, horse stables, people who had land more than just a quarter-acre block or even less that some people have today. And it wouldn't have necessarily been something that was seen, I think, by the people of that day as necessarily being adding to the amenity of the place they lived in, but it might have been seen differently in the 50s to the way it has been as the years have progressed. Now, of course, Carlisle doesn't have horse stables, farms, agricultural produce, vineyards and the like. It is full of vibrant neighbourhoods where people live, and they have gradually over time come right up to the doorstep of this particular property. It is unfortunate that we now appear at the end of a line of local governments who've taken objection to concrete batching plants being in their area. And whilst it is said we're now key to the continuation of this concrete batching plant, I do have a serious concern that this is not what our community wants for its future. It doesn't want a concrete batching plant in its backyard, and I think I speak not just for people in Carlisle but for people across the town who don't want that. It would be really great if Wholesome gave consideration, instead of increasing the capacity of this plant, to actually looking for something in Welshpool's industrial area, as is located in the cities of Belmont and Canning, where I consider there could be a proper opportunity for a batching plant to be still close to the CBD and achieve its goals, and allow something more suitable to be located in this particular location. So those are the reasons why I've set them out. They're based on what I consider a proper planning considerations. Deputy Mayor Ife, as the seconder, did you wish to be heard?
Very briefly, I don't need to elaborate too much on your comprehensive reasons. Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I do support this alternate. However, as this is a planning matter, we do have to ensure that we have a foreshadowed officer recommendation. So if this alternate does fail, I will foreshadow that the officer's recommendation will be moved after that. However, I am supporting this alternate. I have to say I would love vineyards and horse stables in Carlisle, but alas. I do appreciate the efforts that Wholesome told us that they've undertaken with this newer design to try to reduce the impact on the neighbours. But at the same time, I do hear the concerns from the neighbours about the 24-hour operation and the increase in size and scale. And it is my inclination to support the views of our community on this one. It's simply not our responsibility as a town to accommodate an industry that Vincent has moved on to deal with that issue as a problem for us. I was actually really disappointed during the deputation to hear that there had been no real investigations undertaken to consider another industrial area, one that isn't opposite people's homes. I would have thought that a plan B that doesn't involve being a neighbour of families would be a priority for a project such as this. So I do understand the need for concrete for all of the building that we need to be seeing around Perth. I absolutely do appreciate that. But I also maintain that the town of Victoria Park isn't responsible to ensure that we have that supply of concrete, especially not to the detriment of families who live directly across the road. So I will be supporting this alternate, and I thank you for moving it, Mayor Vernon.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ife. So I'm going to formally ask, is there any dissent? Because if there is, we'll need to move to traditional arguments. So there is indication of dissent. So Councillor Hamer, would you like to speak against?
Yes, please. Thanks, Mayor Vernon. We have heard from the community against this proposal to expand the output, and I do see that it's a warranted, especially as the concern for dust and noise mitigation at the site that is so close to the viable end of its life, and the outcomes that those residents are currently experiencing. An increase of output logically has an increased risk of those issues. But looking over the plans and the traffic management, I do feel comfortable supporting the current officer's recommendation and the conditions to deliver and operate within our acceptable noise and dust levels. The proposed wet batching, use of electric loaders, better noise walls, etc. We'll see much of those concerns hopefully addressed. And plus, the heavy vehicles will be avoiding the Con Street residential side of the area. This site has been This has been at the site for a considerable amount of time and will become an even more important facility in the near future as our demand for concrete obviously increases with our future capacity of density. This isn't a question about do we want a concrete plant or not. It's about do we want a better plant than what has been approved currently, or do we want to update the improvements with a better design, which is the current proposal. Regardless of the East Perth capacity shortfall, this facility does require a redesign in the short term, as we've heard that the life capacity of the current facility is getting close to that at 2030. So I can't see any future where there isn't a concrete batching facility at that site. It's just whether it's this proposal or the previous proposal that's been approved. So I do think the better outcome for us and the town and the residents would be to support this proposal, which does have the better noise and dust mitigation aspects included. So for that reason, I wouldn't support this amendment. I will support the officer's recommendation. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hamer. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favour of the alternate? I'm going to go to Councillor Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I support the alternative application for refusal on planning issues, and I will list what they are. Initially, it's in regards to the scheme. LPS2 sets a 12-metre height limit. This proposal seeks silos of up to 31 metres and a 20-metre tower. The fact remains, this is significantly more than the scheme standard. Such a variation undermines the integrity of our scheme and conflicts with the light industry objective to protect residential amenity. Secondly, in regards to EPA guidance statement number 3, recommends a 300 to 500 metre buffer between the batching plants and homes. Here, the separation is just 16 metres. The officers do point out that the technical modelling, but they acknowledge that there is no baseline dust data. Without benchmarks, I cannot reasonably conclude this proposal will improve conditions. The Local Planning Policy 14. The policy is clear that truck movements and outside activities near homes should be limited to daytime hours. This application seeks 24/7 operations, including 110 nighttime truck trips. Noise regulations compliance does not equal amenity compatibility. Traffic and cumulative impact. The plant would generate over 650 vehicle movements daily, nearly double current levels. The amenity impact of that increases, particularly at night, has not been adequately addressed. The draft Oak Street Precinct Plan proposes medium to high density opposite this site. Approving a significant development increase, a 24/7 batching plant here directly undermines our strategic objective to encourage higher density housing around Oak Street Station. So in conclusion, this application conflicts with our scheme, it conflicts with the Local Planning Policy 14, with EPA guidance, and with our strategic planning for Carlisle. So on those planning grounds, I support the alternative motion.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the alternate motion? Anyone else who wishes to speak for? Councillor Melrosa.
I'll speak for the amendment on a couple of reasons. I think this will go to the state, the State Significant Development Unit, and for that reason it's state significance. And when something's state significant, I would think there should be some level of state involvement in how to provide for such a use, given there is such contention around concrete batching plants in the metro area. It seems nobody wants them, but they're completely and utterly important to development. And if the state was so invested in ensuring that the city could be developed, then they would be helping out in terms of finding a site that might meet the requirements for such a use, so that it can limit its impacts to its surrounds. In my view, and as a town planner, I understand the significant amounts of state government land that exist all across Perth. Welshpool has significant tracts of government land that used to be rail corridors. There's significant state government land in Mount Claremont, but you would never see a proposal like this popping up in the western suburbs. And that disappoints me, because I think everyone fairly needs concrete. But this proposal seems to unfairly place the burden on the town of Vic Park to provide that concrete. The presenters earlier talked about how they had various different sites across Perth, but I didn't really hear any particular mention of whether these sites would be upgraded to maybe take the burden off this particular site, and that worries me as well, because it wasn't very clear whether or not this site could potentially accommodate far more greater intensity going forward. And what we've seen in the past is consistent increases in capacity for this site. So on that basis, I would assume that we would continue to see every 10 or so years a new proposal on the table suggesting that we need more capacity for this site. And if we're over-relying on that site, the burden then falls on the town of Vic Park. There's 112 vehicles or whatever it was, quite a lot of vehicles. That's for this particular increase. So if we were to entertain any more further increases, we could be seeing far more vehicles. That's a worry for me. When you look at the site on satellite imagery, in fact, if you look at all of these sites on satellite imagery, you can see the dust leaving the site. You can see the dust on the roads embedded into the asphalt. That to me says dust management isn't being adhered to in any meaningful way. If the dust is leaving the site, there's a failure in that regard. And that worries me. And I see that in this site, and I used to know somebody that lived in one of the presenters' old houses, and I'm very aware of her concerns about the concrete batching plant, and this was in the past, so I could only imagine how much worse it would get. I think the simple solution to me, it seems, really is that just find another piece of land. If there hasn't been a conversation with the state government on how to factor in concrete batching plants, and that conversation hasn't happened with companies like Wholesome, I'd be very worried that the state government isn't managing planning of such an important piece of infrastructure and the ability to provide that material for a growing city. That is really worrying to me. And unfortunately, because that information isn't here and that doesn't seem to be occurring, I think we need to send a message. Unfortunately, our recommendation is really just a recommendation to the State Development Assessment Unit, and I don't know how they're going to assess this, but I have a funny feeling that this assessment will be looked at as East Perth is closing, we need to find somewhere to put this, and that pressure then becomes pressure to approve a development because there are no other alternatives. That is a concern. So I'm not sure how we go forward with this, but I feel like the state government probably needs to do more to help Wholesome and then inherently help all of us to get these sites in places where they belong and not where they don't belong. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Melrosa. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the application? Councillor Miles.
So I also support the alternative motion. When the deputation was given, it was stated that the concrete production has to go somewhere. And obviously, like everyone else in the room, I understand we need concrete, but there are industrial areas where these plants can exist that are not in our community. And it is not our responsibility as a community to meet the needs that were previously provided by the East Perth facility in Carlisle. Like, it's not up to the Carlisle community nor the town of Victoria Park as a whole to put up with the negative consequences of a triple-sized noxious industry in our area just because no one else wants it and we're the only ones left. I guess the reason I joined council was to, advocate for our community. I live in Carlisle, I live at the other end, but I live in Carlisle and I know how important this is. And I want to do the right thing by our community. So I will be supporting the alternative motion.
Thanks, Councillor Miles. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? If not, I'll close the debate. I have to say that in my view, this absolutely is about whether we want a concrete batching plant in Carlisle or not. And it isn't about whether we just want a better plant or not. What is being proposed is, since there is going to be a closure of East Perth and no other site within the CBD or inner city areas has presented itself, all of Wholesome's eyes has turned to the Carlisle batching plant. So notwithstanding that there was an approval in 2021 for the Carlisle batching plant to increase its output to even operate 24 hours a day, Wholesome didn't seek to do that. It didn't take any steps with regards to that planning approval. And although that planning approval, thanks to COVID, got an extra 2 years over the 4 years time period for completion that it ordinarily would have had, and that time period has not yet run out, they've replaced that approval with this application for even more. And I am concerned, as Councillor Melrosa rightly says, that what is the future going to look like? Frankly, over the years, concrete batching in this location has just steadily increased. And there's no reason for us to think that as our insatiable need for housing continues, that we won't have an insatiable need for more concrete. And if this site can take more than 300,000 cubic metres of production that is currently proposed by this proposal, what's to say that in 3 or 4 years' time there won't be another council receiving yet another opportunity to speak on a report to the WA Planning Commission where even greater capacity is sought for a modern, new and advanced plant. And as industries like this advance and technology advances, new processes for manufacturing are invented, new products, things that can be made cold instead of hot, etc., etc., where does it end? And clearly, Wholesome considers that this plant will have a life of the next 50 years. And I'm thinking about the next 50 years worth of people who live in Carlisle and our town. And I don't feel like this is what we want for our area. And the state government has said that housing is their number one priority, and I understand that. That means that they do want us to do the heavy lifting in terms of approving housing developments every single place we can put them. And we are not going to be able to attract developers who want to build a great medium to high density apartment complex that looks out on the wonderful view of 6 silos, 31 metres in height, nearby, because it will be the people who live in those lofty apartment complexes who'll be looking out at these silos, even if the people who live in a single dwelling at ground level can't quite see the silos for a variety of different reasons. People will be seeing it from somewhere. There'll be a visual amenity. There'll continue to be concerns with the management over dust and noise. I think as one of the questions that was put to our deputation presenters asked, well, what happens if there's, say, a traffic pile-up on Orong Road? What happens if there's a fire at the batching plant and the batching plant is out of commission for months or longer? The fact of the matter is, if all the risk and all the loading is going on this plant, that to me is something that is unacceptable as a burden for our community going forward. And more needs to be done to send the message. Hence the alternate motion includes advocacy from myself and the CEO to the WA Governor and the Minister for Planning to say, before this is approved, we actually want to see the WA Government take some steps to move this and provide some opportunities for Wholesome to be located strategically within the corridor they want to be, but not necessarily right next door to residential homes. So for all those reasons, I do encourage people to think very carefully. This is about whether we want a concrete batching plant to continue in our town for another 50 years or not, and vote that we don't. So if you can now please cast your votes. Councillor Hamer, if you're having technological problems, please just use your microphone and indicate how you wish to vote on the alternate motion, and we'll have the Minutes Secretary record that for you.
Against, please.
All right, so Councillor Hamer wishes to vote against the alternate motion. We now conclude that. I declare the alternate motion is carried. Those in favour, myself, Mayor Vernon, Councillor Anderson, Deputy Mayor Ive, Councillor Melrosa, Councillor Miles and Councillor Minson. Those against, Councillor Hamer. So on that basis, the alternate motion is passed. There are no other officer reports. So we now go to item 10 in the agenda, which is public question time, which I now reopen at 7:12. And ask, are there any questions from members of the public gallery? No, there being no questions, I close public question time. It's now actually ticked over to 7:13 p.m. Item 11 is public statement time. And I'll now open public statement time at 7:13. Is there any member in the public gallery who wishes to make a statement? Yes, please come forward. And it is in relation to the item on the agenda? Yeah, all right, thanks. Mr. Rowe, just take a seat. Just state your name and a suburb for the record. Just get you to press the button on the microphone.
Wrong one. Herb Rowe from Carlisle. I'd just like to thank the council and councillors for rejecting this proposal. I helped a good lady take up a petition quite a long time ago about it. And I was quite worried that there was nothing going to happen. And I'm glad that the council have got quite strongly behind it, because it is diabolical to think that there'd be so much trucks and cement going through the town all during day and night. I live a little distance away from there, but we'd still get the effect of it. So I'm very pleased to see that the council have done the right thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rowe. Anyone else who wishes to make a statement? No? In that case, I will close public statement time at 7:14 p.m. Item 12 on the agenda is meeting closed to the public. We have no matters tonight for which the meeting needs to be closed for the public, and at 7:14 p.m. I now declare this special council meeting is closed. Thank you everyone who came along. Thank you to those who did deputations, those who asked questions and made statements, to those who are listening on live streaming or who will be watching the recording. We know that many people in our community are highly interested in this particular development application, but I just need to stress the Town of Victoria Parks Council is not the decision maker for this development application. Will be decided by the WA Planning Commission through the Significant Development Assessment Unit. There will, as I understand it, and Mr Cruikshank will correct me if I'm wrong, there will be an opportunity, I think, through the WA Planning Commission's process for people to put in submissions when it's coming up for hearing with the WA Planning Commission. So I recommend those who have an ongoing interest in this check out the WA Planning Commission's website to look for the opportunities for you to register your interest to know and learn about coming applications. There may be an opportunity for you to make a submission either in writing or a presentation at a future date. But my expectation is after tonight, time was extended for our council to provide our recommendation on this, and after that is received, it would be my expectation that the WA Planning Commission will move forward with progressing this towards their decision, and that could happen anything within the next possibly 3 to 4 weeks or potentially longer. So for those who are interested and want a further opportunity to be heard, that happens outside our council. But thank you again to everyone who brought this to our attention. We appreciate that. Appreciate the town staff's time. Appreciate that they've just heard council pass a resolution that is contrary to their recommendation for what should be done. But we do appreciate everyone's work towards bringing this to our attention. So thank you. We're adjourned.
Councillors, staff, members of the public, please be upstanding for Her Worship Mayor Karen Vernon. Thank you.